Right, so would like to round up our history paper one, the history of Zimbabwe, and we are going to look into the Lancaster House Conference, which ended the second Chimurenga because the whites felt like they were now under pressure. I think we once mentioned about the transitional government, Rhodesia, Zimbabwe thing, you know. So the British government is the one which mainly called for this meeting, because it was the one which was under pressure, even international pressure. So, like, there were several reasons why they called this conference. Like, why number one, there was pressure from the international community. For example, the Commonwealth was increasingly demanding a solution to the struggle. So there was also driven by need to protect whites from complete defeat. Yes, and also to protect them. Because they were supposed to reach a scenario whereby some whites, because they were now seeing that they were going to be completely defeated. And if they don't come out with a sort of a caucus or a meeting, the blacks won't spare them. That's why you find out that we had a policy called reconciliation. Have you ever heard about it? We usually answered it in social studies at primary, the reconciliation. The black government, in 1980, havana kuita do away with the whites. Vakatotanga kutoshandidzana nazvo zvatangira paLancaster House Conference. Zvekuti kudai Lancaster House Conference isina kuitwa, blacks were going to be brutally vindictive. But they didn't do that. They accommodated the whites thereof, you know. So the Patriotic Front, ZAPU and ZANU, jointly led by Joshua Ngomo and Robert Mugabe, the British government delegation led by Lord Carrington, and the Zimbabwean Rhodesia delegation led by Abe Umzorewa and Ian Smith, had to converge so as to protect the interests of the whites in Rhodesia, right? So there were some agreements which were made, like there was supposed to be a transitional arrangement towards majority rule, which were agreed upon. Majority rule is like, okay, the blacks are now taking over, but we have to respect, we have to take into consideration the position of the whites. So the British government agreed to provide funds to purchase land for resettlement of the landless Africans, because the Africans, the main reasons why we had the war was the issue of the land, you know. So by December 1979, all arrangements for Rhodesia's independence were agreed upon, and the British governor, Lord Soames, his name was Lord Soames, was to supervise the transition, right? So the actual meeting was on 10 September 1979. Invited to the conference was the Patriotic Front and the Smith, Mzorewa and Stole delegation. The chairman of the meeting was Lord Carrington, the British Foreign Secretary. The conference agreed on 100-member seats parliament, that there was supposed to be a parliament with 100 seats. So 80 Angari Machi Emma blacks, then 20 Emma whites. So Lord Soames was to be the interim governor from 21 December to elections, because there were supposed to be elections which were supposed to be held in 1980. So Rhodesian troops were to be withdrawn to their barracks. Guerrillas would be placed in 16 assembly points, and a pension scheme was worked to protect white interests if they did not want to serve under the blacks. Those are some of the things that they agreed on, right? So the talks actually started in October, and I think I mentioned about the parties which were involved. The British government, the Patriotic Front, ZANU and ZAPU, Mzorewa and Smith's Rhodesia Front. So the talks could not reconcile the demands of the parties, especially on the land. But a compromise was reached. When you say a compromise was reached, on some of the issues. Number one, land distribution and resettlement. It was agreed upon, and the government of Britain was to meet half the cost of the resettlement. The British were the ones who had dispossessed the people. So, yeresettlement kuti alright mablacks ari kuzowana pamwe pekugara. Yes, vari kuwana pekugara, but vanoda kutanga life, vanoda kutanga kuwana land, vanoda kuita sei. So what are you going to do? So vakaita half. The Zimbabwean government was to fund the other half, then my British will fund the other half. So in 1980, the UK pledged an initial amount of £20 million. So land was thus to change through a willing seller, willing buyer mechanisms. Apana murunga itoriwas where like land in Chisimba. Paitwa no the willing seller, willing buyer. You know what I mean?
Willing seller, willing buyer.
Exactly. The blacks were in a position which you know in Magawaya Muno. Would I mean Takutora land you? Like what happened around 2000. And it's also justified because Vakatora food land in Chisimba. Pakaitika Hondo, Anglo Nebele War, Pakatotika even second Jimurenganger land. It is one of the major causes of the war. But at that point in 1980, we said no. Kana chino tengesa land yako, tengesa. Iwo kana chino tengao, mapon. So the whites had to retain 20 uncontested seats in the new assembly. I think that's Anangura. So there was to be a ceasefire and the Zanla and Zipra guerrillas to be put in what we call assembly points. Like the Rhodesian soldiers who belonged to Smith were supposed to go back to the barracks. Then our fight were not ceasefire and they could have seen a assembly points. So this was to be followed by a free and fair election based in a one-man, one-vote basis. And there was to be no constitutional amendment of those terms for a period of what? Of 10 years. The Apanacha for that period. So, as a candidate, you are supposed to critically and objectively analyze the implication of the Lancaster House. And this was an important settlement in the east of Zimbabwe and a possible examination area. So, according to the Lancaster House, elections were supposed to be held. They were held in March of 1980. They were internationally supervised, which means there were some observers from outside who came. Results were Mzorewa ANC got 3 seats, ZANU-PF got 57 seats, ZAPU got 20, ZANU-Ndonga got 1. So the Africans contested for only 80 seats, so the other 20 were for the whites. Thus, on 18 April 1980, Zimbabwe became an independent state with Robert Mugabe as prime minister, and the new prime minister formed a government of national unity and offered Joshua Nkomo the position of president, but he declined it. Then Kenan Banana eventually took up the post, you know. So it was sort of, we had a president and a prime minister, like what we once had during the unity government period, like 2009, 2013, when you have President Robert Mugabe and you have Prime Minister Mugen Tsvangirai. That's sort of the system that was there. So Robert Mugabe didn't start as a president; he started as a prime minister. Kenan Banana was the president. So that's it for the paper one. Sorry, paper one. So tomorrow we are starting European. Taifa no itanga next year, but it have to go itanga this year. We are moving very fast. So from tomorrow we are starting European section A. Chatutanga is left set.